Alright, so today we're going to talk about conveying chaos using your shutter speed. So hey, this is Dylan Golby, photographer in Seoul again. I'm back in Seoul now. I was down in Hoi An for about 6 or 7 days teaching a workshop with my friend Etienne from Pics of Asia. And one of the situations that we faced while we were down there was an extremely chaotic morning at a fishing village. And one of the things that I tried to instill in the participants is that you don't always have to be using a fast shutter speed to capture a specific moment. One of the other things that you can do, and one of the things that really stood out to me, was that the scene was very chaotic, and so I wanted to be able to convey that chaos in my images. And there are a couple of ways to do that with your shutter speed. The first thing is that you can actually use an extremely fast shutter speed to freeze motion, things like water droplets flying out of the ocean and things like that. Or you can use a slower shutter speed to show the blur of the action that's happening. And so I'll run you through a couple of images today and show you how I did that. So first up, to give you an idea of the sort of scene we were facing, what was happening here is that there was a fish auction happening on the beach, and those fish were being brought in from trawlers that were further out in the ocean by smaller circular boats. And so these men would row their way out there, pick up a certain quantity of fish, bring it back into the beach where ladies would be waiting to essentially auction it off to the highest bidder. And so what you end up with is a lot of people yelling and screaming, the waves crashing on the ocean, boats banging together, and just all manner of chaos. And trying to distill that down to simple moments that showed the interactions between these people was tough, to say the least, but it wasn't the only way of expressing this scene. So I decided to focus on a series that had shorter shutter speeds and longer shutter speeds to show the chaos and also the moments that these people were facing. So in the end, I shifted my focus from the people and the moments to the actual chaos itself. So that became my subject. Now, in this first frame that I'll show you here, what you'll see is a man getting his boat back over the waves to go out and pick up more fish from the trawlers. And so this happened repeatedly again and again and again. And I really wanted to capture the moment of violence when that boat hits that wave there, and you get that splash of water, and the man is trying to get into his boat to make sure he can get himself out there as well. And so with this, I worked with a much faster shutter speed, and I was really trying to capture the height of that moment as this happened. So to capture something like this, I'm going to try and be around a 500th to a 1000th of a second, something that will, even with the speed that those water droplets moving, will freeze all of that and give you an idea of just how explosive that hit of the boat and the wave is, but also capture the movement of this person who is trying to jump into the boat as well. So at this point, I'm on aperture priority, and I have my ISO set high enough to make sure that I get a really fast shutter speed, and I'm also on continuous high with my drive dial to make sure that I can shoot 3 or 4 frames and get that absolute perfect moment where all the water drops are spraying. So for this next frame of the fish auction, I'm not trying to capture a specific moment, but more so the feeling of being there. And the feeling of being there is a whole lot of people moving in and out, hands grabbing at things. And so in order to capture that, I decided to use a slower shutter speed. So I set my ISO much lower this time, and I set my aperture, I dialed it down so that I wouldn't be letting in so much light to get that longer shutter speed. And from there, I waited and waited until there were a mass of people, and I got my frame and I just held my camera still and let all of the action in the scene blur. On this next frame, I actually noticed that there were a lot of women carrying huge buckets of fish around the market, and they would get 3 to 4 people and a couple of bamboo rods and dangle these huge buckets from them, and then they try and work their way through the crowds. And so I wanted to also be able to capture that motion. So the key here, I think, is that it's exactly the same technique as the previous image, where I'm slowing down my shutter speed and allowing the motion to render as a blur in the image, but this time I'm following these people. Now I'm moving as well, which is another element that's going to blur the scene. So if I were to stand still, they would become a blur, but I wanted them to be sharp. So I'm running along with the camera at my face, trying to match my speed with at least one of the people in the group so that I can get a point of sharpness surrounded by the chaos and the blur of this. Now, again, in this one, I have my my drive mode dial set to continuous lows. So I'm going to be continuously shooting. I don't have to keep pressing the button. I'm just going to be going as I follow them. And in the end, with something there's so many moving parts like this, with me walking, the people moving, possibly tripping over things, the last thing I want to worry about is having to continuously press the shutter. So I'm hedging my bets by shooting a lot of frames. So I hope that's given you guys a bit of an insight into how you can use your shutter speed to creatively interpret the scene in front of you. Of course, there's quite a few ways you can use a longer shutter speed, things like panning or extremely long exposures where you're blurring the motion of water and things like that. But in this market, I felt like the combination of fast shutter speeds and slow shutter speeds was a really good way to interpret the scenes. So thank you guys again for watching. You can check out Etienne's tours at picsofasia.com. You can check out my work at dylangolby.com. You can also find me on Facebook at Dylan Golby Photographer, Instagram at Dylan Golby Photographer. Please give the video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. Feel free to comment below and subscribe to see more content like this every Wednesday. Thanks, guys.